was February of 2011. The young Henry Cavill of 27 years old had just been announced as the new Superman, and Entertainment Weekly magazine published this issue in which it talked about how this actor, until then little known, was selected by Zack Snyder to star in his next film, Man of Steel. According to what Cavill says, he had to wear the iconic Christopher Reeve suit for his audition, and his mind could only think, "You're not ready, you're not ready. Oh my God, they're going to look at me and they're going to say he's not Superman, no way." When Snyder saw him in the suit, he sensed something special about the actor. In his words, he came out and no one laughed. Other actors put on the suit and it felt like a joke, even if they were great actors. Henry put it on and projected this calm and confidence that made me say, wow, this is Superman. It's been almost 12 years since this magazine was published, and unfortunately, Cavill's Superman hasn't appeared as much as we would have liked. We saw him in Man of Steel, which had no sequel, Batman v Superman, a film focusing more on Batman with divided opinions, and in both versions of Justice League, where he only appears towards the end. His character also had two other changes in which Cavill does not appear, one in Shazam and another in Peacemaker, and we recently saw him briefly appear in Black Adam, a film that was promoted as Cavill's return to the character. Weeks later, Cavill announced on social media that he would no longer return as Superman due to a change in situation. Henry Cavill's Superman had great potential that was never fully utilized. And it's certainly strange to see how Warner left their iconic hero on the bench for so long. That's why in this video we're going to delve deeply into this situation so we can understand a bit better why Warner suddenly makes these abrupt and strange decisions, especially when it comes to the character of Superman. The internet is a place full of controversies where it's easy to get lost, but here we organize reliable information and present it to you in an orderly manner so you can stay on top of everything. Today, the rise and fall of Henry Cavill. Man of Steel presented a completely new approach to Superman compared to previous adaptations. Here, the Man of Steel was not this perfect character who always knows what is right, but it is a film that shows us the first steps of Kal-El on his way to becoming the iconic hero he is destined to be. This darker approach to Superman is something that today seems overused, especially due to the number of productions in which we have seen imperfect or downright evil versions of Superman, but it should be clarified that this was not yet the case in 2013. I love this approach as it was very different from what I had seen in the Christopher Reeve films and Superman Returns, but many people disagreed. This new approach caused the film to have a mixed reaction from the public and critics, as many people did not connect with this version of the character. Scenes such as the destruction of Metropolis, the death of Zod at the hands of Superman, and the scene where Jonathan Kent tells Clark that maybe he shouldn't have saved his classmates were particularly heavily criticized. The film has a 56% approval rating from critics and 75% from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. This likely impacted its box office, grossing only $668 million worldwide on a $225 million budget. You might think it's a success since it grossed more than double. But this number doesn't include marketing costs, and besides, Warner expected more from the character. To put it in context with other films from the same year, with a budget of 150, with a budget of Iron Man 3 grossed $1.2 billion. 20 years ago, I would never have thought that a Thor movie and an Iron Man movie, two characters that were little known outside of comics, would be more profitable than a Superman movie. Even so, Man of Steel had made a profit, and Warner continued with its plans to establish this movie as the first in its new cinematic universe, one that would be developed by Zack Snyder and would have the mission of competing against the successful Marvel Cinematic Universe. 3 years later, the next movie in this universe, Batman v Superman, came out. I clearly remember the day the first reviews of Batman v Superman came out a couple of days before its public release. One cannot forget Ben Affleck's face while promoting his own movie as if it was dead on arrival. The vast majority of them heavily criticized the movie for its execution, tone, and above all for feeling rushed, as the film not only presented us with a conflict between Batman and Superman, but also suddenly introduced the Justice League and had Lex Luthor and Doomsday as villains, revisiting elements from the Death of Superman arc in the process. Not only that, but scenes like the Martha one also divided the opinion of their fans, some saying it was something cool and others saying it made no sense. The biggest problem, in my opinion, is that this film failed the character of Superman. As this movie emphasizes Batman, Superman is pushed to the background, becoming a character who reacts to situations rather than driving the plot forward. So much so that the character's death is not as emotional as it should have been. However, a major clarification is needed. Snyder initially planned for Batman v Superman to run for 3 hours, but the studio, anxious about releasing a superhero film exceeding 2.5 hours, altered this shortly before the premiere. Eventually, we did get the 3-hour version through the Ultimate Cut, and there we realized that most of the parts that were removed were from Henry Cavill, which surely contributed to the fact that we felt his character had no development. And this is a recurring pattern we're going to see in this story, that Warner is always suddenly reacting to situations like it hears the criticisms and makes sudden decisions, which often makes things worse. Batman v Superman currently has a 29% approval rating from critics on Rotten Tomatoes and a 63% approval rating from the public. Economically, it performed well, grossing $872 million on a $250 million budget. However, Warner anticipated more from the DC Trinity. For comparison, the Civil War film released the same year earned $1.1 billion with an equal budget. Henry Cavill, for his part, promoted the movie by putting his best face forward and saying that it was a film made for the fans and not for the critics. You know, the old reliable. Warner was not only reacting to box office results, the reality is a bit more complex than that. Other analyses that were made sometime after the premiere pointed out that the intense marketing campaign that Warner built for the movie greatly increased its costs. So it is said that it ended up costing between $400 and $550 million. Most importantly, Batman v Superman did not meet the studio's expectations economically or in general audience reception. The film became highly controversial among comic fans, causing the studio to doubt Snyder's entire universe. Since then, the studio became more critical of the dark and violent tone Snyder proposed for his films, so they tried to make major changes to David S.'s film. Goyer's Suicide Squad was set to further expand Snyder's universe. Unfortunately, when it premiered in August of 2016, 5 months after Batman vs Superman, the critical reception was even worse, so now Warner was convinced that the approach of the Snyderverse simply was not working. Rumors began to circulate about Zack Snyder's clashes with studio executives, their attempts to reduce his responsibilities, and their search for someone else to lead the DC extended universe despite Snyder's close involvement. Was it really a way to fire him without him losing his job? All of this to take care of public relations. In the end, the abrupt and surprising death of his daughter Autumn made Snyder decide to take some time to be with his family. Despite the sad news, Warner acted quickly. Joss Whedon was announced to take over Justice League, correct the script, do reshoots, and present a version far from the Snyderverse. This was a maneuver to try to rescue the characters. At that time, before his multiple accusations of workplace abuse, Whedon was considered the king of the nerds for his great geek stories on television, film, and comics. But things didn't go well for him either. The Justice League film certainly did present us with a more optimistic Superman, like the one the public wanted, but unfortunately it was very poorly executed. For starters, the reshoots were done at the time when Henry Cavill was filming the Mission Impossible Fallout movie, which meant that Cavill had a contractual obligation not to shave his mustache. Joss Whedon likely said they would fix it in post-production. And this was the result. You know, it must be very hard to ruin Cavill's beautiful face. Computer-generated imagery wasn't the only issue. The studio also wanted the film to have an action comedy focus like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They cut the story's duration to 2 hours total. And it's not that it's bad that it's a 2-hour movie or that it has comedy. The problem is that it was not originally filmed or conceived that way, so trying to adapt it to this style and format was painful to watch. To this day, I don't remember a worse experience in the cinema in my life than watching Justice League. And they took some of the most iconic characters from the comics and delivered a completely forgettable and generic movie. That's why today I want everyone to join me in saying, I hate you, Joss Whedon, I hate you. The film was a failure no matter how you look at it, as it only managed to gross $657 million on a budget of $300 million. It's worth remembering that in a movie, you usually spend about the same on advertising as on production, so the movie probably broke even. The film was also a critical failure, and its director, Joss Whedon, was embroiled in a series of scandals because of it, from those that portray him as a violent and arrogant director who threatened to destroy Gal Gadot's career, to others accusing him of racist attitudes. After all this, the DC Comics brand was severely damaged, and Warner Bros. Hired Walter Hamada to try to save the franchise. And believe it or not, the worst for Henry Cavill is yet to come. Walter Hamada's presidency was filled with quite strong controversies. That is, he arrived right after the premiere of Justice League, just when Ray Fisher's accusations of workplace abuse began. However, it was also during that time when that universe began to stabilize and had its first successes. After seeing the great reception of Wonder Woman, Hamada announced that they were going to try to focus on standalone projects that worked instead of trying to build a large universe. Wonder Woman was followed by Aquaman, which grossed over $1 billion at the box office and is to date one of the best received films by critics and fans of the entire extended universe. Shazam was praised and Joker was nominated for an Oscar. It should be clarified that Joker was not successful due to anything Hamada did, but that's a topic for another video. The strategy was working, but there was something that remained. The campaign to save the Snyderverse kept growing and growing on the internet, and the fans never stopped questioning why it wasn't appearing. The change that was made to a part of Superman's body in Shazam caused more uproar, as Warner seemed committed to bringing back the Man of Steel, but not Henry Cavill. Rumors suggest Walter Hamada fabricated claims that Henry Cavill didn't want to return as Superman or demanded too much money, which is why he didn't appear in Shazam. However, these rumors remain unconfirmed. The actor never openly discussed the topic, and when asked about Superman and the Snyderverse, his responses were consistently positive yet ambiguous. In fact, he kept so quiet that he was the only actor who didn't say anything about the Snyder Cut until Zack Snyder confirmed that, indeed, it would be a reality when all the other League members had done so before. Cable then remained loyal to Warner. In May 2020, Zack Snyder announced during a live broadcast that the famous Snyder Cut would finally be released on the home box office Max platform after numerous controversies. This film was much better received by both critics and the public. However, being a streaming project, we couldn't see a box office result as such. The road to the Snyder Cut is a lengthy topic covered in depth in one of my favorite videos on the channel, linked in the description. Unfortunately, Superman's role in this film was limited, as the story focused more on introducing Flash and Cyborg to the public. There was a beautiful scene of Superman in the black suit, remembering his parents' teachings with biblical references, but the film didn't delve much further into his character. So, if you notice, in 7 years, Henry Cavill's Superman was hardly developed. It's true that he dies, revives, and this surely gives him a different view of the world, but it's something we don't see on screen, as his appearances after reviving are very few. We have a few scenes at the end of Justice League and a silhouette of Superman at the end of the Peacemaker series, which obviously is not Henry Cavill. The release of the Black Adam movie gave us fans hope that this would change. For several years, one of the strongest rumors around the Black Adam film was that Superman was going to appear in it. Not only because The Rock and several people involved in the film suddenly hinted at this in interviews, but also because Dani Garcia, The Rock's manager and ex-wife, is also the current manager of Henry Cavill. So it seemed like the situation was ripe for things to happen. And yes, the miracle happened. More or less. Henry Cavill made a cameo appearance as Superman at the end of Black Adam. And in the days following the premiere, The Rock explained how Warner didn't want to bring him back and how difficult it was for him and his production company to secure this cameo. Cavill, for his part, posted a hopeful message on his social media saying that he was back as Superman and that there were big things in the future for the character. Not only this, but he also quit the 3rd season of The Witcher, and Joe made a very long video of what we could see in Man of Steel 2. I ended up looking stupid, didn't I? And well, we all knew what happened next, but the question many are asking is, why did Warner Brothers announce the return of Henry Cavill and then shortly after let him go? As always, it all comes down to money. The film Black Adam was produced by 7 Box Productions, owned by Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, and Dani Garcia, Henry Cavill's manager. The Rock aimed for Black Adam's box office success to ensure Warner Brothers' continued support. Would consider him and his company to lead the DC universe. In fact, in an interview with Variety, Johnson said, "The best position I could be in at DC is as an advisor." That's why he promoted Black Adam like no other movie in his career, attending many press events, posting a lot about it, and fighting for Cavill's return, something he hoped would help him at the box office. Unfortunately, Black Adam was only able to gross $391 million on a budget of $260 million. Adding another $260 million in advertising costs, Black Adam was a financial failure. The Rock claimed there were profits, but Warner has denied this. The critical reception was not very favorable either, but I did see that it was a movie very much enjoyed by the fans. All of that caused The Rock's plan to fall apart. Warner Brothers hired James Gunn and Peter Safran to direct the DC Universe, and shortly after this appointment, reports began to emerge saying that Wonder Woman 3 had been cancelled, something that has already been confirmed by director Patty Jenkins, and that Aquaman 2 would be the last film in which we would see Jason Momoa in the character, so everything pointed to a massive reboot for the franchise. Soon after, Cavill announced on social media that his time as Superman had unfortunately ended. If Black Adam had been the success that was planned, we would be having a completely different conversation right now. Remember, Warner tends to react suddenly to situations. Unfortunately, it seems that Cavill got caught in the crossfire of a power struggle between two people, The Rock, who wanted to preserve fragments of the Snyderverse, and James Gunn, who is aiming more for a reboot. In fact, there are even reports that literally say that Henry Cavill was a pawn in Dwayne Johnson's struggle to try to control DC Comics. Regrettably, all agreements were verbal and made when James Gunn and Peter Safran had just started setting up their new office. In the end, they had specific ideas, they had to answer to the studio, and again a wave of big changes was going to come. Jenkins denied claims that she did not want to return to work, assuring she was open to whatever was coming since her project could not move forward. Cavill also said something similar on his Instagram by writing that they were studio decisions and changes. I think it was very painful for everyone to see this post from Henry Cavill saying that his time as Superman had come to an end when he had just recently said the exact opposite. The thing is that after all this, Cavill ended up like the dog in the manger. On one hand, there's no way he can return to The Witcher. On the other hand, they took away his dream role a few days after he announced his return with great fanfare. New reports suggest Gunn is considering their options. It's said that Ben Affleck could direct, that Black Adam could return afterwards, that the doors are open. As a fan, such comments usually inspire hope. But we have to take into account that in most cases these statements are intentionally ambiguous so as not to commit to anything specific. There are talks that Ben Affleck is going to direct a DC movie. Which one? It's not known when. They don't close the door to collaborating with Henry Cavill in the future, but the project is unknown. It's not known when, neither. It's about being ambiguous so that people see a ray of hope. It's more or less what happens like in this scene from A Couple of Idiots. I want to ask you a question. What are the chances that Ben Affleck returns to being Batman? I would say, so you're telling me there's a chance? Yes. Meanwhile, Cavill will start starring in Warhammer 40,000 for Prime Video, an adaptation of a video game that he likes a lot, but until we have an official announcement of something bigger, this series feels more like a consolation prize. Do you think he should start a bigger campaign to become the new James Bond? This whole situation bothers me a lot. On one hand, I was really looking forward to seeing Henry Cavill's Superman developed and see him in a deserved sequel because I feel his character had a lot of potential, which was never fully exploited. On the other hand, I feel he stood to gain the least in this DC power struggle, yet lost the most, which I find unfair. The Rock, well, he is The Rock. He will surely continue playing roles as the same character as always, and in a few months he will see Black Adam simply as a bad moment in his life, and that's it. Despite the fact that he recently said that he will continue exploring the most valuable way to use Black Adam in the DC multiverse. Dude, it's not going to happen. You know it. James Gunn has a big job ahead, and I hope he's up to it. He's a talented writer but has shown a limited range of styles so far. I hope Warner trusts him and lets him do his job without hasty decisions just because something didn't work out initially. DC fans need stability, and if they choose the reboot path, they should commit to it. Gunn mentioned that Superman without Cavill is the studio's biggest priority, so I hope for news of a new adaptation soon, as we've gone too long without a Superman movie.